Part 1. Dirty Words. There are some pairs of words that are frustratingly easy to confuse. Sometimes it's because they sound alike, and sometimes it's because they have similar meanings. More than half of the questions I get from listeners are about these confusing word pairs. I imagine people staring at the computer screen, frozen with fear because they don't know whether to use further or farther, and finally giving up and rewriting the whole sentence to avoid the issue altogether. That's a good way to deal with it if you're unsure, but these confusing word pairs are my favorite topic because it's usually easy to come up with helpful memory tricks. And once you know the right words, you can just say what you want to say instead of going through contortions to avoid making a choice. Affect versus effect. Every week, someone asks me how to remember the difference between affect with an A and effect with an E. These two words were also in the list of top 10 words that people looked up on the website dictionary.com in 2006. So I believe it's fair to say that this is a common point of confusion. The good news is that there are a lot of easy ways to remember the differences. First, I'm going to dispense with the rare definitions and focus on the most common uses. The vast majority of the time, affect with an A is a verb, and effect with an E is a noun. Verbs are actions, and nouns are people, places, or things. I'm going to pronounce these words a little strangely in this segment to make the difference between them more clear. Affect means to influence, as in, the weather affected the bus schedule, or when the chairman was arrested, it affected the company's valuation. Or the rain affected Amy's hairdo. Affect can also mean roughly to act in a way that you don't feel, as in, she affected an air of superiority. In all of these examples, something is changing. Affect is an action, it's a verb. Note that affect and action both start with the letter A. Effect has a lot of subtle meanings as a noun, but to me the meaning a result seems to be at the core of all the definitions. For example, you can say, the effect the weather had was amazing, or the sound effects were amazing, or the rain had no effect on Amy's hairdo, or the trick-or-treaters hid behind the bushes for effect. In all those examples, effect is a thing. It's a noun. So most of the time, affect with an A is a verb, and effect with an E is a noun. One trick that's true most of the time is that if you can put an article, such as an or the, in front of the word, then you should be using effect with an E because it's a noun. I remember this by remembering that the ends in the letter E, and effect starts with the letter E, so the two E's butt up against each other. But for me, the best quick and dirty memory trick for remembering that affect is a verb and effect is a noun is to think of the sentence, the raven flew down the avenue. That helps because raven and avenue both have the letters A-V-E-N in them. And that helps me remember affect verb, effect noun, because the words also start with A-V-E-N. The raven flew down the avenue, A-V-E-N, affect verb, effect noun. Backward versus backwards, and toward versus towards. When backward and backwards are used to describe verbs in sentences like, the children moved backwards, and count backward from 1 to 10, backward and backwards are both correct and interchangeable. Many sources say that the S is more common in Britain than in the United States, so you should take into account what the convention is in your country and use backwards in Britain and backward in the United States. This regional difference is another reason that you're probably confused. If you read the New York Times and the BBC websites in the same day, you could see the word used both ways. The exception is that when you use backward as an adjective, in other words to describe a noun, as in her grandmother's backward ways, or the program has backward compatibility, then you never use the S. It's always backward as an adjective. So, if you're in the United States, you have it easier, because you can just remember that it's always backward without the S. We like shortcuts here, like drive-through restaurants, so you can remember that we've lopped off the S. But if you're using British English, then you have to remember that it's backwards as an adverb and backward as an adjective. The story is similar for the words toward and towards. Both are correct and interchangeable, and you can use either one because they mean the same thing. Many sources say that the S is more common in Britain than in the United States, so you should take into account what the convention is in your country and use towards in Britain and toward in the United States. Again, the memory trick is to remember that Americans like shortcuts.